Ben found out we were live. I was just gonna spring it up on him. I was just gonna go
I
live.
can see it in the top left-hand corner.
That's a shame. They need to not broadcast sensitive information like that. Ben, what are you wearing?
Am I wearing? I'm wearing a jacket.
So no Auburn jersey.
No Auburn jersey. You're not wearing Liberty stuff. You've got on a Mustang hat and a George Costanza
The
shirt.
Liberty just won a heck of a game.
Did they?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Who'd they beat?
Eastern Kentucky, who was
there you go.
Yeah, battle between first and third in the conference. So Liberty remains.
Wait, is Liberty in a conference now?
For basketball.
So they're independent in football, but in basketball they're in what?
ASUN.
What is that?
The Atlantic Sun Conference. Though now it's just called ASUN.
Okay.
Atlantic Sun.
I didn't know that was a conference.
Kennesaw State's in it, brother. You can go 15 minutes down the road and watch an ASUN game. In fact, Liberty plays at Kennesaw State, I think, Thursday.
Really?
Yeah, you should go watch them.
Isn't Kennesaw State in the 2A?
No. They're FCS in football, but in basketball, it's all Division One. There is no FBS and FCS in basketball. Are we having?
I pay attention to basketball. That's why I'm on a football podcast where I don't know enough about football either.
Do you know? Okay, let's have an honest discussion. Do you know more about college equestrian than you do college basketball?
No. But I do listen to War Horses on the E2C network from time to time, so I've learned a lot about equestrian.
How about that plug? Like, three a fastball right down the middle, 85 and home run.
Oh yeah,
that's what this is about.
Out of there.
Yeah, free promos.
Look, don't love baseball either. I don't know, man. I guess I'm a one sport pony.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's all good. All right, what are we doing? So. I mean, we're like,
about
do you know how much people have to get through to get to the actual meat of our podcast? It's ridiculous.
Oh, a ton. It's ridiculous. At this point in time, it's going to be 3 minutes of us just riffing.
Here's the thing. We don't care about the number of listeners we have. We only care about the quality of our listeners, right?
Yeah.
But we only want people that are like, listen, if I'm listening to CJ and Ben, I'm going all in. I'm going to wait till, 10 minutes in to get the meat, and I'm good with it. I'm going to deal with it. That's the way to do it.
They can skip if they want.
No, well, why give them that option? Listen, if you're skipping our podcast, we don't want you anyways.
Look, people come for the riffing. They stay for the.
When I sell our podcast to the advertisers, and they're always like, "Well, how many people listen?" My response is, "It's not about how many; it's about the quality of the listener." It never gets anywhere, but I keep trying.
We have tens of listeners, and baby, they're engaged.
Tens. How about that? That's new as of last week. It was 5.
Hey, we're next off the big leagues.
Yeah. All right. Let's do this coaching grading thing. So I wanted to do this a while ago. We haven't done a podcast since the college football championship, which was. There was no reason to do there was no reason to do a podcast. People were doing reaction shows. I'm like, what do you want me to say? Georgia's good?
Gosh, and TCU was as bad as we thought they were. They just were lucky.
I don't think they were lucky.
They were lucky the majority of the season. All right. What? We didn't do a podcast on it. We're covering it now. So TCU had so many opportunities to lose.
The Michigan
the Michigan game was a fluke. Michigan got
blown off. What game are we talking about? They had so many opportunities to lose. Which game?
TCU had so many opportunities to lose the entire season.
Okay. I'm sorry. Throughout the whole season, yes.
And they were so lucky, even going into Michigan. Where, come on, Harbaugh, what are you doing? Get your guys ready to play. You destroy Ohio State, and then you just fall over to a TCU team that got crushed by Georgia. Pathetic.
Well, I don't think I don't think it was all luck. What I will say about TCU is this. We've seen this happen in college basketball where you'll have like a VCU, who obviously is not one of the four best teams in the country, but they make a run, right? They get on a hot streak. They're playing really, really well, right? Every week, every game they go up against a team who has a bad shooting night or whatever. And it was kind of like that for TCU, right? Like they kept on playing hot. They didn't have a mistake-ridden game, and every team they would play, would have one of their worst games of the year. I don't think it's necessarily luck. I think that's just they got hot at the right time, Now, the Michigan game, I thought there was a lot of luck in that. There were a lot of bad calls in that. But at the same time, Michigan threw 2 pick sixes in that game. I thought TCU outcoached Michigan in that game. I thought TCU's game plan was just flat out better in that game. So I think you can even point to some of these games where it's like, okay, did TCU get some luck to be able to win? For sure. But you could explain why they won. I don't think you really had a game where you're sitting there going, how the heck did TCU pull this off? Like, it wasn't like they had a miraculous upset type of thing. I want to get to Sonny Dykes here in a bit because grading him was really interesting. Just really interesting. But let's start off at the bottom, Ben. I want to get to some of these bad coaches out of the way. So
do it.
We're at the bottom of the Big 12 standings and work our way up. Every coach is going to get a letter grade. So me and Ben are the professors of College Football Coaching Success 104. It's a mandatory requirement for all incoming. I don't know. This was going to sound, it sounded better in my head. Now it's completely destroyed. All right.
I love it. It's a prerequisite for being able to watch ESPN. So I'm glad you stopped here. Let the professors take the floor.
Okay, let's do it. Matt Campbell, Iowa State. I'm going to start. Ben, he gets a C from me, and I know they went 4-8. Here's the thing about Iowa State. They lost Brock Purdy. They lost Breece Hall. Now, at the start of the season, I don't think we thought those losses were as big as they were. But if you sit and you reflect on what those players have done post-Iowa State, well, Breece Hall has gone into the Jets and immediate impact to the Jets. Brock Purdy took the NFL by storm. I mean, he's been incredible. And so I do think you have to look at it and go, wow, those are 2 really, really impactful players, not easy to replace players. There's some people saying, well, how much of that was Matt Campbell? How much was it, Brock Purdy personally? I anytime I look at a situation like that, I think both contribute, right? Mm-hmm. But if you actually break down, so if you look at Iowa State's record, it's like, okay, 4-8, that's bad, whatever. But if you actually break down their season, they beat Iowa at Iowa. That's their biggest win of the year. Yep. And then they had a bunch of close losses, Ben. Like, the only game they really played where they got absolutely annihilated was to TCU, and it was late in the year, and TCU needed a big win, and they just went and crushed Iowa State. But other than that, 6 of their 8 losses were by 1 possession. I'm okay with it. What I will say is this, and here's the 2 big issues I had with this team. They ranked 119th in the country in scoring, only averaged 18 points a game. They ranked 129th in red zone scoring. Now, you're going to see throughout this, I'm going to mention red zone scoring a lot. I think, this is just my theory. So this is CJ's take, whatever, CJ's opinion. Really talented players get you into the red zone. Okay. Both offense and defense. Really talented players get you into the red zone. Really good coaches get you points in the red zone, right? Because you're dealing with a shortened field. You've got 20 yards to work with. I think that's where it comes into coaching. And the issue I had with Iowa State is they ranked 129th in red zone scoring. So they had opportunities, but they couldn't score when they got in there. That, to me, is a coaching thing. Now, I still like Matt Campbell a lot, They had a bunch of close losses. I don't think next year they're going to lose 6 games by 1 possession. Some of those will go their way. So I'm honestly giving Matt Campbell a C here. You lose 2 really valuable players. You have a bunch of close losses. I can give you some exceptions, but the red zone scoring was a big, big problem for Iowa State. And honestly, if they had fixed that, Ben, this team might have been in a bowl game rather than sitting at the bottom, at the the cellar of the Big 12, rather.
Yep. And so there's a few things here in Iowa State before I kind of give them a grade. First, to your point, losing some of the top players from the previous year. Brock Purdy's, granted, things could change, but the way I see it, he's the reason Tom Brady retired. Because, Tommy Boy wanted to get out there to San Francisco. And then Breece Hall was on my fantasy team. I didn't have any running backs and picked that guy up, and he was great.
That was a great pick.
So, look, yeah, you lose talent year over year. You gotta figure out how to plug in players and perform. And the state of Iowa, quite frankly, doesn't score offense. So they, the team across the state, the Ball Hawks, they have a good defense. Iowa State had a very good defense the year prior. Offensively, lots of challenges. You're right. Now, the big reason of why I think that they get kind of a C+ and grading here is because of their state champions. You can't take that away. Yeah, the Big 12 kind of down. TCU was a surprise.
Ben. Hold on.
State champions, baby.
Okay, hold on. This is ridiculous. This is we talk about college football, not high school football. I don't care about state champions.
It matters.
How?
It matters to the program. It matters to the players. It matters.
You think Georgia fans are sitting going, I'm so thankful we're better than Georgia Tech, Georgia State, Georgia Southern. Is there another team in Georgia I'm missing?
I don't know. Kennesaw State. They don't play them.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure Georgia's like, oh, man.
For a little while,
maybe. Those Yellow Jackets.
See, here's the thing. Georgia Tech has sucked for a long time. If that was a good team, then it would matter. Now, you go a state over, and you've got Auburn and Alabama. That's one of the biggest games of the year.
This is a take only an Auburn fan can appreciate. Is, man, we beat Bama. We're the best in the state. That's an Auburn take. I honestly don't think
UVA in West Virginia. Look at where you're at.
Virginia.
Or UVA and Virginia Tech. Sorry, Hokies.
Yeah, they're
UVA and Virginia Tech.
Tier 3 programs.
Still,
Virginia Tech is going to be coming after me after this. They're 2 tier 3 programs. They should, yes, they battle over who's the best in the state. Iowa and Iowa State, I don't think care that much. Does that play into your? Keep going. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you. It sounded like Salem High School bragging about beating James River.
It happens. The Salem has an incredible stadium, by the way.
Sure. On that note, please continue.
I don't even remember where I was going with this.
Great.
Look, Iowa State has their issues.
That was mean.
They're going to figure it out. But overall, think this team performs better going into next year. Think they will learn with the pieces they built in. And don't sleep on Iowa State from not making it to a bowl game next year.
I think you have to, when you're judging these coaches, Ben, to your point, I think you have to respect which programs are we going to allow rebuilding years. Oklahoma, which we'll get to in a little bit. Oklahoma doesn't get a rebuilding year. I'm sorry, you're Oklahoma. You should always have talent. Iowa State, you know how many 4- or 5-star recruits the state of Iowa produces? Not a lot, right? That is a hard place to win. It always has been. Like before Matt Campbell came there, that program was nothing. Like I think people forget because they've been there the past few years. they've been just as bad as Kansas has been. Like, that's been their history. And so they get a rebuilding year. I'm okay with it. And if in their rebuilding year they win 4 games and 6 of their 8 losses are about 1 possession, that's your rebuilding year. That's okay. So I know a lot of people are like selling their Matt Campbell stock. I'm not going to say it's a great year, but I'm not selling any Matt Campbell stock just yet. I'm okay with it.
Good call. Who's next?
All right. We gonna what was your letter grade for Campbell?
C plus.
C. Okay, so I gave him a C. You gave him a C plus. Cool. All right, let's go. Neal Brown, West Virginia. Ben, he gets a D from me. And I'll tell you this: West Virginia, and Ben, like I know you grew up in Virginia with me. I don't know if you remember the year where like West Virginia, Louisville, Rutgers were all like insanely good. And those rivalries back in the day between West Virginia and Virginia Tech, and like nobody wanted to go play a game in Morgantown because the team was good and the
You get
fans
pegged by batteries.
Well, yeah, the fans were nuts. Like take B fans and multiply it by 10, and you've got West Virginia fans.
Yep.
But I think, Ben, it's when they are good, it's one of the funnest programs in all of college football. And it's just such a shame. And we got a little glimmer of it when we watched them play Pitt, right? Like we got the border rivalry back, and it's like West Virginia Pitt. This is amazing, and a little bit of it, but it's just a shame to watch this team not be competitive towards the end of the year. I thought Neal Brown did a really, really bad job this year. First off, their best player, Jordan Jefferson. He had 3 sacks on the year, 10 tackles for a loss. He was just constantly in teams' backfield. He was their best player. He's transferring to LSU, so can't retain your best player on a bad team. That's not great. They did go to Oklahoma State, a 7-win team, put off a win. They lost to Iowa State 31-14. Here's the thing. Iowa State ranked 119th in the country in scoring. They averaged 18 points a game, yet against West Virginia, the offense looked really competent. That's a big problem for me. And West Virginia's defense ranked 119th in the country. They allowed 35 points a game. They just look incompetent on that side of the ball. And I'm all for offensive coaches. But West Virginia, to be bringing in a quarterback like JT Daniels, they have access to talent. We know that. And for them to just go in constantly, look incompetent. And again, if you want to look at a coaching matchup, Iowa State in a rebuilding year, West Virginia in a year that I think a lot of people had hope, especially with JT Daniels coming in, and you get trounced by a real rebuilding team, that speaks volumes about the coach, in my opinion. So I'm giving Neal Brown a D. I thought it was awful. I can't understand for the life of me, Ben, why West Virginia hung on to him. Like, to me, it's a year past time for him to go. This feels like what Virginia Tech was doing with Justin Fuente.
Well, proximity-wise, that plays a little bit into it, I'm sure. Look, I want to take a step back for a second. West Virginia in the Big 12 still doesn't make a ton of sense to me.
Does
and
not.
So the fact that they're having to go across the country week in and week out to play these games is got to be challenging on this team. So let's start with that. Because back when you were talking about they were in the Big East, and the Big East, it was decided between Virginia Tech and Miami almost every week, but there were other players that could definitely step up.
Oh, yeah.
And the competition was a lot more, I guess, level set and regionalized when they were all kind of competing with each other.
On this point, because this is a great point that you're bringing up. Right now, what's the big theme in all of college sports? It's conference realignment, right?
Yep.
And I think we all feel inevitably we're going to end up with 2 to 3 super conferences, right? So all these conferences are looking to expand. Doesn't the ACC have a ton of interest in adding a program like West Virginia? But if you're the ACC, but if you're the ACC and you're looking at West Virginia right now and you're going, look, they don't have a really good coach right now leading their football program. They've lost a lot of momentum, and they don't have enough respect to their program to fire their coach. Why would we hire? Why would we bring in a program that doesn't value football the way Clemson wants their opponents to value football, the way Florida State wants their opponents to value football? Like football is, if the ACC is going to keep Clemson and keep Florida State and keep Miami, they want to see that the conference is backing football, right? Well, if you're letting a coach like Noah Brown hang out after that type of a season, there's no reason for the conference to bring them in. I think this could set West Virginia back a lot further than just the future of their football program.
Yeah, that's a valid argument. Probably what's his buyout, I think, is the biggest thing, because typically schools will make an investment when they can. West Virginia is not the richest state in the United States.
That's
like coal has been going down a lot. That's one of the biggest exports from there. It's been a mild winter, so not a lot of people are skiing, snowboarding.
See, I'm looking up the buyout now, so you continue.
Okay, so all that to say, it's a different world from when we were talking about West Virginia being
right now at
really
16.7 million.
See, that's insane. Is
that a lot?
16.7 million?
Like for a buyout?
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's see. Auburn paid Gus Malzahn $21 million to leave.
Did they? Okay.
I want to say they paid about that to, I should know this, but I don't, to get Harsin out of there. But still, $16 million is a lot of money when you would want to put in another coach. Okay. The coach got JT Daniels to come, and that's a big thing. Is JT Daniels, is he gone now? He should be, right?
I think he
bounced around 15 programs. He transferred again?
I think so.
Good for him. Somewhere else.
Yeah, he's transferred to Rice. He's now playing for the Owls.
Man, talk about taking a step back.
Great academic school.
Okay, cool. I hope he gets a good degree, because he'll be using that the following year.
God. Ben,
all right. I've gone way off track on this. West Virginia way underperformed what I expected them to do this year.
Yeah.
There are people in the media, specifically Pat McAfee, who reps West Virginia and played on one of the teams that was in the contention of being in the title mix.
Oh, yeah.
They should have enough presence in the country to be a superior program to what they are. They should have, they have decent talent too.
Yeah.
I do believe a lot of this comes down to coaching. And like I said, they have their backs up against them because they have to travel all the time. So that's very challenging when you have a 5-week student who then has to leave classes at some point in time to go travel and play a football game. That does not fit well in an academic school year. But other teams do it fine. So it's not necessarily an excuse.
But their travel is insane. I mean, they're going West Virginia to Baylor.
Yes.
Next week to Texas. I mean, like,
these aren't short flights.
It is another great point by you, too. So I think about the future of the Big Ten with UCLA, USC now going in there.
Man,
I mean,
talk about a disadvantage for a team traveling to California.
You're going to have to travel to Penn State, you know.
That too, yeah.
To Ohio State. That's a cross-country trip.
It's 3 time zones.
Yeah.
So it's college football is going to get a lot crazier, which is going to be fun. Anyway, overall, I feel like West Virginia had the talent to be much better than they were. I think with the right coaching, they could have been one of the better teams in the Big 12 this year. because the coaching wasn't there, you've got to give them. I'm even going to go less because there were some games where West Virginia should have been in it and they just weren't. I'm saying like D minus here. That they've got to figure it out, and with the churning of talent, and I haven't heard anything about West Virginia and the transfer portal or anything like that. Hope they do better. If I was looking at Iowa State being on the up trajectory, West Virginia is on a downward trajectory, and that's not a good thing.
Yeah, no, I would agree very much so. And so I mean, like they won 5 games, 2 of those wins against Towson and Virginia Tech, who was awful. They did beat Oklahoma State. That's a nice win. They beat Oklahoma, who was bad. They beat Baylor, not great. And by the way, if you look at those 3 wins, Baylor by 3, Oklahoma by 3, Oklahoma State by 5, they were trounced by Texas Tech 48-10. Lost to Iowa State 31-14. Yeah, and then I mean, at the start of the year they did go to Pitt and played a great game there. But I really don't think, and somehow they lost to Kansas by 2 possessions in overtime. That's impressive. To lose in overtime by 2 possessions. It's pretty impressive. I think. I feel like that's ridiculous. I think Neil Brown, like I get the buyout, $16 million. I think if you're the AD, you get on the phone with some of your boosters and you just say, we've got to get $16 million together to get rid of them, because it's not working. All right, let's move on from that rambling. Lance Leipold at Kansas. This, Ben, I think was the toughest one to grade because they started off the year so well. They were ranked. They host game day? I think they hosted game day. Yeah. And you're sitting there going, man, Kansas is like a legit good football team. And they felt like TCU before TCU was really TCU. And then, I mean, talk about the wheels falling off the wagon at the end of the year. Kansas, after starting off the year 5-0, went 1-6 in their last 7. Multiple. They had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 losses by more than 1 possession. So absolutely crushed in those games. And then they had a triple overtime loss to Arkansas in the Liberty Bowl, which was a fascinating game to watch. Ben, I'm going to give my grade for Lance Leipold. I'm giving him a B. I think we have to acknowledge getting Kansas to a bowl is really, really impressive.
Agreed.
There is something to that. And Devin Neal, amazing running back. But if you look at their schedule, really their best win probably against Duke. That was probably their best win. And Duke was a good team. Duke won 9 games. Not a bad win. They were crushed by Texas. And then here's the other thing. Their offense averaged 34 points a game. Their defense allowed almost 38 points a game. So in this year where they had a winning record and everything, they still allowed more points than they scored. I don't think that's very good. I think they won some games that maybe we didn't have on the radar. They maybe pulled off a couple of upsets. That was about it. It's impressive to get them to a bowl game, but I'm not been like, there are people that are like, Lance Leipold's like the next great coach. I don't know that yet. I think he had a good year. They won some games. Let's leave it at that. If he can duplicate it, that would be great. But I'm not giving him like this A+ year like what we've seen with Sonny Dykes. It was impressive, but it wasn't to that level.
Yeah, what was Kansas's record the previous year?
Kansas, I don't think has had an 8-win season since like 2008 or something.
Yeah, I want to say that I don't know if they won a game. That was the thing. Okay, so
they were 3-9. They were 2-10 and 21. 0-9 Les Miles in his last year. in 2020.
They were 1-8 in 21-22.
Yeah.
So
their
2-10
last
overall.
season was 2008, and since then they've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years where they've won 2 games or less.
Yep. So look, Lance Leipold came in and took a team that had 2 wins under their belt the year before, and took them to 6-0. Or I think it was, or was it 5-0?
5-0.
5-0. And everyone was loving Kansas, and that first loss was to another undefeated team.
Yeah, TCU. It was a close game. It was 38-31.
Yeah, who ended up going to the college football playoff. So another game right there where I thought that TCU was going to lose, and Kansas, you're right, wheels fell off. But here's the thing: that team went from not believing to believing in a single offseason. And yeah, the season didn't end the way it probably Kansas would have liked it to. But the start of it, taking a team that had no hope and injecting them with hope is going to be an upward trajectory type thing here.
Well, and too, Ben, it's a little hard to grade this season now. Like, I think this is one of those years it'll actually be easier to grade in 2 to 3 years from now.
Oh, it will,
because
for sure.
This is either like a one-hit wonder, right? Or this is that pinnacle year where he really laid the foundation for building a program that's going to be successful, right? But you don't know that yet, right? It could have been a one-hit wonder. It could be maybe they've got a really good foundation, but you can build on this.
And right now, I tend to believe it's a foundation building because you took a team with 0 expectations and you injected life into them.
Yeah.
Out of nowhere. A team that should not have performed as well as they did early on. So the teams that Kansas beat, Tennessee Tech, sure. West Virginia, so here, you just brought this up a second ago when we talked about West Virginia.
Yeah.
How did they win in overtime 55-42? I do not remember that game at all.
I think there was a pick 6 thrown at the end of the game.
Is that how that worked?
I'm pretty sure.
Wild. Yeah. Houston, who I thought was going to be a very good team preseason, stupid me, got crushed by Kansas. Duke, who actually ended up being a pretty good team this year overall in the ACC, all things taken into account, beat down. Iowa State, previously very good team, beat by Kansas.
Yeah, so, Kobe Bryant. That's why I knew that. Kobe Bryant had a big pick 6 at the end of the game, 86 yards, pick 6.
So in the first 5 games of Kansas, I expected them to go 2-3 or maybe 1-4, and they went 5-0. So.
I think, Ben, I predicted them to lose to Tennessee Tech at the start of the year.
Did you?
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
So, look, when you take a team with 0 expectations and you make them look very good, right. I know that the end of the season was tough. The fact that they stayed with a good Arkansas team in the bowl game, I thought was very impressive, too. The only reason they lost that is just because of the overtime rules, and KJ Jefferson is a monster. I have to give Lance Leipold an A.
Okay.
I realize.
Sure. Yeah.
I realize the back half of the year wasn't up to par, but it's Kansas, and he made Kansas something. That's a huge coaching improvement.
Yeah, but I think we got to build on it. Like if they're 4-8 next year, I think we come back to this year and go, okay, what was this? You know?
Yeah, I think you're right.
It's gotta continue. All right, this one excites me. Brent Venables. Okay, I'm gonna say this. Everybody is selling their stock on Brent Venables, and I've been probably his harshest critic pre him going to Oklahoma. But Ben, I'm just going to give him a C-.
That's it?
That's it. And I'll tell you why. If you look at the cards he was dealt at Oklahoma, So first, Lincoln Riley goes and takes all of his offensive talent with him. Takes Caleb Williams with him. Takes receivers with him. I think he took an offensive lineman with him. Takes all of his talent from all the offensive talent gone, right? So then you can say, okay, well, Brent Venables at least inherited defensive talent. Well, Oklahoma's been terrible on defense for about 2 decades. Like they've literally been one of the worst defensive teams in all of Power Five for about, I mean, like the past several years, ever since Lincoln Riley's been there. That's been a big problem for them. So Brent Venables is a defensive guy. He's not clever on the offensive side of the ball. And you're asking him to win games with 3-star cornerbacks and 3-star defensive linemen. That's not going to happen. On offense, I think an offensive coach can come in and turn around an offense really quickly because it's about scheming, it's about cleverness. You can usually get 2 drives, first drive of the game, first drive of the second half, where you can find some points. But a defensive coach, defense, I think a lot has to do with chemistry. I think a lot of it has to do with effort. And I think a lot of it has to do with athleticism and depth. Oklahoma had none of that this year. None of it. So I'm willing to give him a little bit of a pass. Now, Dillon Gabriel was great, but Dillon Gabriel was coming off, I think, a ridiculous injury, right? I think he's had 2 of them the past few years. Yep. So he's coming in. He's playing on this ankle that's not right. Their best one was against Oklahoma State. They were destroyed by Texas, right? Here's my big problem with Venables, and this is why I'm not going to give this a B or anything like that. This is why it's a C-. Brent Venables is supposed to be a good defensive head coach. And Ben, I don't think he's actually this defensive mastermind people think he is, or that he was hired to be.
Didn't look like it.
Well, this defense ranked 90th in the country. And here's the other issue is, again, go back to my red zone argument earlier. I think coaches are made in the red zone. They ranked 89th in the country on defense in the red zone. They were awful there, right? You should have been able to limit some people to field goals. You should have been able to come up with some interceptions, some better coverages. That makes no sense to me. That falls on the shoulders of Brent Venables. And I started arguing, I've been arguing for the past few years, that what he had been doing at Clemson, I thought the weakest part of Clemson's game past several years, the reason why Trevor Lawrence didn't win a second national title, is because the Clemson defense was not there. Remember, the Clemson defense got absolutely annihilated by Ohio State in that semifinal game. Mm-hmm. That, I think, again, falls on Brent Venables. And I just don't think he's this defensive mastermind. Now, I think he brought value to Dabo Swinney. But I think the value was not in his ability to come up with these amazing defensive schemes. I think the value, and this is the concerning part if you're an Oklahoma fan, the value Venables gave to Dabo Swinney is he's an excellent support person to a leader, right? I think he managed a lot of the things that Dabo didn't want to or couldn't, and took stuff off of Dabo's plate. But just because you can do that, like some people have been, and I'm going to switch gears here a little bit. Let's go into politics, sort of. Vice president, you can have a great vice president, right? Like Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney would have been an awful president, right? Al Gore. A lot of people liked Al Gore. He would have been an awful president, right? You can be a great vice something or a great support person, but not necessarily be great at being the person in the role, right? I think you can be a great coordinator, not because you're great at schemes, but because you're a great support to that head coach, and not be a great head coach. And the more I look at Venables, the more that's what I see. I don't think it's completely end of the world for Oklahoma, because I think they did some good things. They got better as the year went on, right? Played a great game with Florida State at the end of the year. But it doesn't come without a lot of concerns.
So you were very kind to Venables in this.
Really kind.
Well, you're much kinder than I'm going to be.
Oh, here we go.
First, your take on vice president. Some people would say that Dick Cheney called all the shots in the Bush administration. So, I mean, there's a movie about it too. Check it out. It's called Vice.
We should do a podcast on that.
We should. Lots of opinions there.
I think my opinions on Dick Cheney is his name is very appropriate.
Huzzah. The difference between Kansas and Oklahoma are expectations. Kansas, no expectations. So you come in and you're just even mediocre. You're like a rock star. Oklahoma, all the expectations in the world. And if you come over as this touted massive hire and you don't do anything in the portal because the previous coach took players, and then you perform like Venables did this season and just get smashed in the face by Texas, not scoring a single point and letting 7 touchdowns get scored on your team, well, guess what? You probably aren't doing a good job. After the first 3 games where Oklahoma played UTEP, Kent State, and Nebraska, which Nebraska at this point might as well be on the same level as UTEP and Kent State, they got punched in the mouth by Kansas State, beaten down by TCU. And granted, Kansas State won the Big 12 and TCU went to the playoff. And then Texas beats you 49-0. Dude.
Well, here's the other thing about that too, Ben. Quinn Ewers didn't even play in that game.
Did he not? I thought he came back for that one.
No, he was injured.
He got beat by a non-Quentin Ewers and just got... So, at that point in time, Kansas put up 42 points on you. 42 points. Baylor beat them 38-35. West Virginia beat Oklahoma. And we gave West Virginia a D-. Or I did. You gave him a D. Look,
Ewers did play. I'm sorry. I thought Card still played that game, but no. Keep going.
I thought he came back for that. The one bright shining star for Oklahoma is they were state champions, but apparently to you that doesn't matter. They beat Oklahoma State.
Are we on this again?
So because
Oklahoma fans don't care.
Because Oklahoma fans don't care. Look, Venables being a touted defensive mastermind and letting almost every team hang up 40-plus points on you gives you an F on the year. You did not do your job. You did not coach the defense. You did not handle this team correctly. And man, I really hope you figure it out before you have to come to the SEC in a year, because you are going to have way more tough competition than what you've been experiencing, and you look like trash.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. If you had put Oklahoma and Texas in the SEC this year, I think I'd make the argument the worst coach team in all of the SEC would be Oklahoma.
I agree with that. And that's with a Brian Harsin Auburn team.
That's true.
So there you go.
That's
F for Venables. You got to figure this out, dude, or you're gone.
Yeah. No, I think it is a pinnacle year that he's going into. I don't know. I mean, Ben, what would you say? Okay, win-loss record. What's it have to be for him to retain his job? I think it's got to be 8-4.
8 wins. Yep. Yeah. It's got to be 8 wins. You can't have another losing season as the head coach of Oklahoma, who has more money and prestige than almost any other team in the Big 12.
Well, and I think it's interesting, Ben. If he doesn't have 8 wins, they go into the SEC next year.
With a new coach?
Well, right. And I think the allure of Oklahoma going into the SEC could probably yield the best available coach, right?
That's true.
Maybe if, Lincoln Riley goes to the NFL, USC would be in that spot, or if Ryan Day gets canned at Ohio State, they'd be in that spot. But
Ryan Day could do some great stuff at Oklahoma.
You look at these big programs, I'm not sure what the next one to open up is. Maybe Miami, but I think Oklahoma's better than Miami. So, yeah. So, I think it's interesting. I think he's in a pinnacle year because it's really attractive to Oklahoma to say, look, we could fire you and have the best opening out there and be able to get the best available coach this next year. Maybe it's more than 8 wins. Maybe he's got to get to 9 or 10 to be able to retain that job. I think 2023 is a big year for him. All right, let's go next. Dave Aranda at Baylor. Ben, Dave Aranda, I thought was a terrible hire 2 years ago. And then last year, he completely proved me wrong. Baylor won the Big 12. Yep, they looked amazing. I had them picked this year. I thought they were a legit threat to win the Big 12. They looked to be almost exactly what I thought they would be when they initially hired Aranda. Eric Gray's one bright spot. They smoked a good Texas Tech team. That's great. Worst loss was to Oklahoma State by 11. Here's the big issue. Dave Aranda is a defensive-minded head coach, and their defense was bad. 114th in red zone defense, 98th in red zone offense. Scoring defense ranked 72nd, allowing 28 points a game. This was my criticism with Aranda coming in to Baylor. If you looked at Aranda at LSU, his defenses at LSU were not that great. He had all of that talent in their championship year, and they still couldn't stop anybody that year. The only reason they won that championship is because Joe Burrow just flat out outscored anybody playing. I remember that ridiculous Alabama LSU game. LSU didn't have a defense that game. It was just, who was going to get the ball last, and it happened to be LSU. I didn't like the hire. I thought this was a bit of a disappointment from him, honestly. And this is what I say with Lance Leipold, what he did at Kansas, right? We're all impressed with it, but when you're a newer coach, how you build on that is so important. And I thought Dave Aranda had an opportunity to build on what he did last year, didn't, and you're dealt with a disappointing season. So I'm giving him a C on the year because, and it would be lower, but Baylor is still Baylor. So to get that team to a bowl means something, but definitely a disappointment.
Yeah, look, I think Dave Aranda, while he did not build on the momentum that he had from the previous year, it wasn't a disappointment in my mind. Now, yes, they had a losing record. They were 6-7. That is not acceptable when you're one of the better teams in your league. But they had a handful of things where it was bad coaching, honestly. Yeah. I guess that's really what it came down to. Look, they lost in double overtime to BYU back when BYU was one of the better teams, and BYU finished out pretty good. That was their first loss. They lost to a West Virginia team that scored on average 14 points a game, but they scored 43 against Baylor. That is not good. Oklahoma State beat them down. And then the one that really irritated me, look, they beat Oklahoma, so I mean that's pretty good. The one that really irritated me was the stupid TCU game. Because this was another time when TCU should have lost. All Baylor had to do was stop TCU from getting into field goal range. They owned this game, and TCU had less than a minute. And TCU got into field goal range, ran their kicker on, and kicked a field goal as time expired. The kicker didn't even get set. What are you doing? Terrible coaching. Yeah. Terrible way to end that game. Should have taken TCU out, and the playoff would have been better.
Well, and this is the thing. If you lose that game because you're down, let's say 27-24, and you've got the ball with a couple minutes left, and you can't drive the ball down the field, with the defensive-minded head coach, I don't like it, but I understand it, right?
Yep.
But when you've got the lead, right, and TCU's scrambling to do anything, as a defensive head coach, you should say, oh, sweet, I've got you right where I want you, right? You should have a couple of plays that you can go to get that key stop. The fact that a defensive-minded head coach doesn't have that is very concerning to me.
Yeah. Last thing, Kansas State, winner of the Big 12, beat them 31-3. Pathetic. He gets a passing grade because it is Baylor. It is disappointing that he didn't build on the success from the previous year. But there still was a point during the season where I thought Baylor was going to be, there's Baylor that we had seen the previous year. Things just kind of fell apart near the end. Similar to Kansas, Granted, Kansas had no expectations. Baylor's coming off a championship season. For that, he's got a C-.
Yeah. Okay. So a C- is passing in Ben King's class. It's very
It
interesting.
is.
I have very high standards in my class. Just to let you know.
Look, they passed. They didn't look good.
No, true. So you gave Aranda a C-. I gave him a C. So we're right there together on him. All right. Let's go next. One of my favorite coaches in the entire sport, Mike Gundy, Oklahoma State. Here would be my thing with Gundy. It was already a rebuilding year going into it. I think most of us knew that.
Yep.
No, we thought they'd be competitive. And Ben, they were almost exactly what I predicted they would be at the start of the year. I said, I don't think they're going to win it. I don't think they're going to be like a top 10 team or win the Big 12. But this is always the one team you don't want to have to face. Whenever you face them, it's always like, oh God, we got to go against Oklahoma State. They can beat anybody. They can also get beat by anybody, and they really fulfilled that this year. They crushed Texas Tech, 41-31. They were crushed by Kansas State, 48-0. So again, beat a good Texas Tech team, destroyed by Kansas State. That shows you some of the ups and downs. Here's the other thing, and this is maybe the more concerning spot. They went 1-4 during their last 5 games. So throughout most of the year, we're looking at Oklahoma State going, legit team, they look good. 1-4 during their last 5 games, and they had 3 losses by 2 or more possessions against bad teams. Here's who they lost to: Oklahoma 28-13 and Kansas 37-16. Right? Their only win during that 1-4 stretch was against Iowa State at home, and they won by 6. Iowa State was the worst team in the conference all year long. So it's like they had that game against Texas, knocked them off, and then never could get anything going again. Their only win throughout the entire rest of the year was against Iowa State. So I'm giving Mike Gundy a B-. It was a rebuilding year. He's also built up some equity with me. Like Oklahoma State, I think, is going to be back, right? So for a rebuilding year, for you to be back in a bowl game, like, I'm good with that, but the way they ended the year, yeah, a little bit concerning.
So I appreciate your take. I'm just going to come right out with my score right up the front and say that Gundy gets a C.
Ooh,
he's a man.
It is a tough.
He's 50-something. Look, Oklahoma
There's
State
no
had
Ben's class. I'm telling you that right now.
Oklahoma State had the opportunity to be good. They had Spencer Sanders, so I don't know what you're saying as far as a rebuilding year. Granted, they lost some of the other talent around them, but Spencer Sanders is a decent quarterback. He was in the he transferred away in the transfer portal this offseason. I don't know where he landed. There were a few games that really pissed me off from Oklahoma State, so we're going to go over theirs now. The first one,
the fact that Ben's getting pissed off by Oklahoma State football.
The first one that just really had me disgusted after the fact was this stupid Oklahoma State versus TCU game when I picked Oklahoma State to win, where it went to double overtime and Oklahoma State lost. Another game where TCU should have lost. What do you do in Oklahoma State? They beat Texas, which I thought was very impressive.
Yeah.
Bijan Robinson struggled in that game. So, I mean, whatever. Getting destroyed by Kansas State was embarrassing. 48-0.
Yeah.
So, like, that's pathetic. There's been some high points for Oklahoma State. There's been some really low points, and that was one of the lowest. Once again, they lost to Oklahoma in a down year. You're not going to have the opportunity to beat your in-state rival very often. This was a year they should have taken care of business, and they didn't.
It does make you wonder, the way they ended the year, if Mike Gundy had some other jobs potentially calling him, or if his head was just elsewhere. I mean, I think we look at Ole Miss, and we'll do the SEC in another podcast. But part of our Lane Kiffin discussion is going to be the way they ended the year versus the way they started, and it was 100% because Lane was rumored to be the favorite for the Auburn job, right? So he's sitting there piecing together, how am I going to piece together my roster at Auburn? And he's completely, I think distracted by that, and so you can make sense of it. So you do wonder, was Mike Gundy's head elsewhere too? Was he looking at maybe it was the Auburn job? I don't know. But the way they ended the year, whenever you see a team start off as strong as they did, beat Texas the way they did, and then just get trounced and not be able to recover from it, there's something else going on there that I think is a big concern.
Yeah. So now that Spencer Sanders is gone, right now, I think Oklahoma State's going to be Oklahoma State. To your point, they can beat anyone, they can lose to anyone week in and week out. Right. They're not going to be like this high-powered team ever. Even in the years where they were very good, it never felt like they were, this high-powered team.
You can get to a championship. I mean,
well, then anything can happen, right? Stupid Oklahoma State could have stopped that. Now, here's the crazy thing. Oklahoma State this year is going into a rebuilding year because they don't have a leader at the helm. But their backup quarterback last year, technically he was third string, is Mr. Gunner. Do you know Gunner's last name? Gunner Gundy. Get ready, boy. Gunner Gundy's going to be a sophomore. He threw 3 touchdowns and 4 interceptions this season. He's going to get that QBR up from 13.5 to something much better.
We're going to be throwing about 80 times a game.
Look for Gunner Gundy to come in and take Oklahoma State to the next level.
They're going to go full Mike Leach next year and just throw the whole time.
There you go.
Speaking of Mike Leach, let's go to his former school next, Texas Tech, where Joey McGuire came in his first season there. Ben, they look good. They won 8 games. Think a lot of both you and I had Texas Tech picked towards the bottom of the Big 12.
Yep.
They completely surpassed expectations. They smoked Ole Miss in their bowl game. I mean, crushed them. The worst loss was a 45-17 loss to Baylor. I can't really explain that. But this is their first 8-win season since 2013, which was under Cliff Kingsbury. They ranked 11th in both red zone offense and red zone defense. So, again, I think that shows they're a well-coached team when you do that. I'm giving Joey McGuire a B+ here. I thought this was an impressive first year. Now, again, so they won 8 games this year. They actually won 7 games last year. I think the question's going to be with Joey McGuire going forward, was this a one-hit wonder year, or is this something you can build on? Again, we don't have a history with him. We'll talk about Sonny Dykes later, who was also in his first year. We have a history with Sonny Dykes as a head coach. We don't have that with Joey McGuire. Joey McGuire came in, and I thought he looked very impressive with Texas Tech. So, Ben, I'm giving him a B+.
Yep. I'm right there with you. I'm giving him a B. Texas Tech the year before was 3-6 in the Big 12 and finished 5-4 in the Big 12 this season. 8-5 overall. Very good season. A couple of the call-outs here. They beat Texas, but of course that was without the Texas quarterback because he just gotten kicked out because of Alabama being dirty. They lost to Kansas State, Big 12 leader, the Oklahoma State team, and TCU, which I think is tough for each of those, but granted, good teams. Overall, I think this is the same type of situation as a Kansas job because now, granted, Texas Tech has a better pedigree than Kansas, but I don't think there were a ton of expectations coming into this season. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not a Texas Tech fan. They should have been about middle of the pack, and they were above that. And because of them being above middle of the pack, which I think is probably where expectations landed, B is a really solid grade there. Now, just like with the Kansas situation, we're going to be coming back on this and seeing, did they build upon the success they had? And maybe that's the case, maybe not. The nice thing about Texas Tech is they're staying in the Big 12 and things are about to get a lot easier for them. They have the opportunity here in the near future to become one of the premier teams in this conference. So I think that's pretty exciting for them. They're on the up and up.
All right, let's go Texas. Steve Sarkisian. It was another really interesting one for us to grade. Ben, when I first started thinking about this, I thought Sarkisian's going to get a really bad grade. Like, I think he did a good job. Then I actually started going back and looking at the stuff, and I'm like, I don't know. First off, Bijan Robinson, absolute freak, just insane. My hope as a Panthers fan is that they'll trade down in the draft and get him late first round. That's neither here nor there. But Bijan Robinson was amazing. They beat Kansas State, so they beat the team that won the conference 34-27. Their worst loss, and here's the thing, you could argue their worst loss was to Oklahoma State. Ben, they didn't really have a bad loss, though. Alabama, they lost by 1. They lost at Texas Tech. They lost at Oklahoma State. They lost to TCU. And then they lost the bowl game. And that bowl game, I'm not going to give Bijan didn't play, I don't think. I'm not going to grade that bowl super negatively.
Yep.
Here's the thing. They should have beaten Alabama.
Yep.
If they had, we're now talking about a 9-3 team that's beaten Alabama. And TCU, a team that ended up in the championship game, and Michigan, by the way, couldn't stop. Texas held them to just 17 points and was in that game. I think that deserves some respect. Their only other 2 losses were on the road, and those were both close games. But Ben, it would have been very plausible. This team beats Alabama, beats Texas Tech, upends TCU. Well, now we're talking about an 11-1 team that's got a win over Alabama, right? Yep. Everybody's perception over Steve Sarkisian would be totally different had that been the case. But what happened was they ended up going 8-4. So that I think has to play into it. What I will say is this. Sarkisian has had, since his USC days, this reputation of when they go into a big game, you always feel like you want more, right? You just feel like they left something on the table. And I felt that in Alabama. Like, they didn't have that drive towards the end of the game. They didn't have a second gear once Quinn Ewers went out. I thought their defense disappeared against Texas Tech. They had no offensive game plan, I thought, for TCU. That I thought was a problem. Those were your big games. They lost all of them. That's not great. So, I'm going to give Sarkisian a B. I'm not going to sell like a lot of people are doing with him. I think he can still be a competitive head coach. But, Ben, it's the same thing with Oklahoma. You're going into the SEC after this year. This is a big year for him. If they're, I think, 8 wins, I think if they're anything beneath 9 wins, he's on the hot seat.
I don't know. And here's the difference between the hiring of Brett Venables and the hiring of Steve Sarkisian is the recruiting trail. Now, Sarkisian, is he there? Is this his second year?
I believe this is year 3.
This one coming up is year 3?
No, I think he just completed year 3.
Okay, and Venables was in year what? 1?
No, he's coming up in year 3. This was year 2.
Okay, so that's what I thought. So this was year 2. Venables was in year 1. Granted, they're in a 1-year difference. But here's the thing that Steve Sarkisian did when he came to Texas. Quentin Ewers was in Ohio State. Quentin Ewers was the best player in Texas and went to Ohio State. And then Steve Sarkisian brought him back. And if it hadn't been, look, Texas was outplayed Alabama in that game. Texas should have won that game. The reason Texas didn't is because of a late hit on their quarterback, and you're right, they didn't have an answer. Well, Quentin Ewers was supposed to be the guy, and it's second year, so you got to build up that talent at quarterback. Steve Sarkisian is an incredible quarterback coach. Is he a great head coach? We don't know that yet. He's definitely had some opportunities in the past where he has bombed. And I think this may be the area that he has some success in. I'm right there with you on grading. Texas was the third best team in the Big 12. I think it was a B performance. There's trouble in Texas, the fact that the expectations are extremely high every single year. But here are some of the really things that made this special. So Texas should have and very well could have beat Alabama. It was a last-second field goal driven by the fact that Alabama has the best quarterback in the country, Bryce Young, and that is the only reason they lost that game. Losing Quentin Ewers, Bryce Young getting them into field goal range in the closing seconds of that game. They got beat by Texas Tech in overtime. This was one where they still didn't have – they had their backup quarterback, and they still took them to overtime. So that's pretty good. Just Quentin Ewers comes back, and they completely destroy Oklahoma, the biggest rival of that team. Huge. They lost to Oklahoma State, and this was a weird one. I didn't think it should have happened. It really knocked the sails out of Texas at the time. And then that TCU game, another game where Texas should have won and TCU should have lost. I know I've said it 100 times. TCU was just lucky this year.
Sensing a theme here from Benjamin.
TCU was just lucky, man. All these games they should have lost, and they just continued on. Texas was a couple – hell, Texas was one quarterback getting a late hit away from actually being really, really good this year and being in the playoff contention. So I don't think it – and and here's the crazy thing. Not only is Quentin Ewers the quarterback going into next year, they have one of the best players, or at least projected to be, whatever his name, Manning, who just got onto campus.
Yeah.
Arch Manning. He lost his badge the first week, by the way. That was really weird.
He lost it twice.
He lost it twice? Incredible.
Yeah.
Well, just staple that thing to his pants and give him a football because, boy, he's not there necessarily to study, I don't think. But he's going to be awesome. And Steve Sarkisian brought him to campus. So you've got Quentin Ewers, the golden boy of Texas, who came back because of Sarkisian. And you've got Arch Manning, a prodigy, who came to Texas over all these other places. He could have gone anywhere. He came to Texas because of Steve Sarkisian. I don't think Sarkisian's going to be as much of a hot seat there. I think he did a B performance. I think Texas is going to be really good coming up.
But Ben, here would be my thing. And this is, I'm kind of giving away my thoughts on Jimbo for when we do the SEC championship. When you are a big program, because this is like, it's funny. Jimbo, I think, had one of the worst years ever, but A&M fans are like, oh, we can't fire Jimbo. We got to keep Jimbo. I'm like,
well, they can't afford to fire him.
Well, right.
Unless they want to find a new oil field.
Jimbo. Like, literally, they're jumping to his defense. And the main reason, and there's one other which I'll say for when we actually talk about Jimbo, but the main reason is his ability to recruit. Here's my thing, though. If you are a Texas or a Texas A&M or an Ohio State or a USC or an Alabama or one of these big programs where you've got a big brand, a massive fan base, you're in a recruiting hotbed, you have boosters galore, which it was important before that nobody wanted to say it. It's important now and we can actually talk about it, right? And you got all this money. The school can recruit itself. I don't need a good recruiter for a head coach, right? Like Miami hired Mario Cristobal because he's this great recruiter. Well, it's Miami, right? There are kids that are born that are like, I'm going to go be a Miami Hurricane, right? In football, there's not one single kid that wakes up and goes, I can't wait to be the quarterback of Northwestern, right? I value recruiting if you are one of these lesser tier schools And you need a coach that can recruit even when your school can't bring in those top prospects. But it doesn't matter who the head coach is at Texas. There are kids that want to go to Texas. Now, Quinn Ewers did go to Ohio State, right? So I know what you're saying, right? Well, that's fine, but that's just because the previous coach was so bad that Quinn Ewers is looking at it going, I can't trust my college career there, right? He was looking at Tom Harmon going, I can't put my college career in the hands of Tom Harmon, right? So this recruiting thing, it can work for you the first couple of years, but if you don't have that second or third year, even that's going to fall off at some point. And I look at Sarkisian and I think he can be a good head coach, but if they're hanging on to him because he's a good recruiter in 2-3 years and this is still the same results, that's not right either. Like Jimbo Fisher, there's plenty of money at Texas A&M, right? At this point, it's a tax write-off to pay Jimbo Fisher to leave. It ain't like that at West Virginia. It's not like that at Kansas State, right? But Texas A&M, the tax write-off to let him go. When it comes to Sarkisian, I think regardless of buyout in the future, regardless of how he's recruiting, it's ultimately going to come down to can he win the big games? And this year, if you want to make a criticism on him, that's the one thing I think he failed to do.
I think he had valid excuses in at least a couple of them. And the big game against Oklahoma was a big game. And they just smoked them.
Yeah.
It's arguably the biggest game of the year for Texas.
But Oklahoma was so bad, though.
It doesn't matter. They beat them 49-0. It's not just winning, it's how you win. And oh my gosh.
Well, no, I agree with that. But I think how you win also plays into the fact that you smoked a 6-17, 49-0. All right, let's go to the next one. This one's fascinating. Chris Kleiman, Kansas State. Ben, I'm giving him an A. Also, Kansas State's athletic director deserves an A. Kansas State really should not be a very competitive football program. They don't have a bunch of boosters. They don't have a ton of fans. They don't have this ginormous recruiting network in Kansas where the state is just producing multiple 4- and 5-star recruits. It's like Iowa, yet Kansas State always finds a way to be competitive. And Kleiman is a fantastic head coach. Deuce Vaughn was one of my favorite players to watch all year long. Their best win, I think, has to be beating TCU in the conference championship, 31-28. Their worst loss, maybe you could argue, to Texas by 7. They don't have a bad loss, though. Like, if you look at their schedule, Ben, Kansas State just doesn't have a bad loss. Even the Tulane game, which you could argue, okay, that was a bad loss. Well, Tulane beat USC. Tulane was a legit team. That's not a bad loss. I thought what he did with Kansas State to keep them as competitive as he did, they don't have a bunch of talent. I think it's incredible. I think he's one of the best coaches. He's doing more with less. He came over from North Dakota State, having a ton of success. He gets an A from me.
Very, very good take. I'm just going to give him a B. But winning the Big 12 is impressive. That game, I know I've been crapping on TCU all night long.
But Ben, they were state champions. Kansas State was state champions.
Did they beat Kansas?
Yeah, they crushed them.
Oh yeah, 47-27.
State champions.
You know what? State champions right there, getting that B, earning that B. TCU and Kansas State in the Big 12 championship game. TCU should have won that game.
Yeah.
So that was actually one of the games that when TCU went into it, I was like, all right, well, they should win this. And then they didn't. I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Maybe they can get kicked out finally, but whatever. That's how TCU rolled this season. Incredible coaching, by the way. I know we're getting that in a second. When Kansas State lost to Tulane, I was like, all right, well, this is Kansas State. Apparently Tulane was a really good team this year. I don't know if anyone missed that, but they did exceptionally well. I think they won their bowl game, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, they beat USC in the bowl game.
Yeah. Crazy. So Kansas State, when you win your conference championship, you have done a good job. You're right. They do it with not a ton of talent, with a lot of good coaching. And overall, I guess technically you couldn't do better, but because at least they won conference championships. But there were some games where they lost that they probably shouldn't have. Looking at you, Kansas State versus TCU, where you lost by two
That's the fourth
two
time
possessions.
tonight.
The first time around, I thought Kansas State should have won it, and then the second time around, I was like, "Well, TCU is clearly going to win this." And then, whatever. I hate the Big 12. Kansas State gets a B.
All right, I learned this at an early age. You take the pill early. What the heck is your coaching grade on Sunday nights? I may mute you if this isn't correct.
Sonny Dykes won the AP Coach of the Year. Sonny Dykes gets an A+. He took his team. He took
Boom.
a team that never should have been that should have lost half their friggin' games, and he took them to the college playoff. How the heck did you do that?
Ben, go back to the start of the year when we did our season preview podcast. We talked about TCU and we were sitting there thinking like, this was once a great program that's completely fallen apart. Like they're terrible. We picked
And
them.
their
to be
old coach left, and
their
old coach went to Texas to be an analyst.
Yeah. No, and we're sitting there going like TCU might be one of the worst teams in the Big 12. Like I think I picked them below Kansas. And I had Kansas losing Tennessee Tech, which was bad. Both of those were. I completely missed a lot of things on the Big 12 except Oklahoma State. We've never, again, it's what I mentioned earlier. We've not seen in college football the Cinderella story, like that Cinderella run. Like pretty much you can take college football any year and you can pick out 8 teams and know that these 8 teams have a legit chance to win the championship. And nobody else but those 8 teams that legitimately have a chance, right? Like we all go back to that LSU team with Joe Burrow, and I think we like to imagine that as it being this big surprise. Ben, you and I were in the Atlanta airport at TGI Fridays eating some delicious chicken wings. Mm-hmm. See, we need sponsors. TGI Fridays, you need to sponsor us. Ever to Conquer, you need to sponsor us. We're just throwing stuff out there. We're in TGI Fridays. Before the season starts, you asked, who do you think's going to win the championship? And I said, LSU. And you're like, really? LSU? And I'm like, yes. Right? But TCU was on, when I mean nobody, absolutely nobody's radar at all. Right? We didn't even think that we're going to make a bowl game.
Yep.
And I've never seen anything like this where you take a team that we all projected to be that bad. It's not a big brand. It's not like we were projecting Michigan to be bad and then they were good. It's nothing like that. Like it's TC freaking U. They've never really been anything,
with
right?
A first-year head coach coming off of a legacy coach who did great things there, but they hadn't been good in a while.
No, not in a long time. It's one of the most miraculous things I think I've ever seen in college football. And when they got to the playoff, Ben, I think both you and I were kind of like, okay, whatever. Like they're going to get crushed by Michigan. But for them to go and knock off Michigan.
Insane.
I don't even know what to say. Like, I don't even know what to think of that.
It's like Michigan thought they were a joke. Michigan thought they were a joke. Harbaugh did not prepare like he should have. Should have taken it seriously. And they came and they got punched in the mouth. And then they were like, what? And then they got decked and they couldn't get up. They fought back the whole game, but they never got back up.
Right, yeah.
You're punching a dude on the ground and the dude's on top of you. Like, hats off to TCU.
Yeah. No, Sonny Dykes.
It was all coaching.
Yeah.
He took a team of misfits who are not really talented. He took a backup quarterback and made him amazing.
Here's the thing I'm going to say about Sonny Dykes. Texas A&M held on to Jimbo Fisher because they can't afford his buyout. So what if Oklahoma fires Brent Venables and Sonny Dykes and TCU, they're great again. And then Oklahoma hires Sonny Dykes as their next head coach. How much can you afford to be sitting in a conference where, I mean, Hugh Freeze is going to win at Auburn. It may not stay in the record books very long, but he's going to win at Auburn, right? Brian Kelly's going to win at LSU. That may not stay in the record books. And be careful if he asks you to hold a camera in a stand for a while. That could be a problem, right? But he's going to win some games at LSU, right? And so if you're Texas A&M and Oklahoma comes in with a coach like Sonny Dykes, how much could you afford to not fire Jimbo and hire Sonny Dykes this past year? That's what doesn't make any sense. The fact that TCU in your own freaking state, speaking of state championships, Benjamin, right? In your own freaking state, he can go into TCU with a bunch of 2- and 3-star recruits, take them from nothing to into the championship game. And Jimbo Fisher every single year has a top 5 recruiting class and is going 4-8. And you're like, we just can't afford to fire him. Listen, I'm telling you, I think you can't afford not to make that move. Like that was to me when this happened, I'm thinking, well, that's the most logical next thing is they just beat Michigan. Texas A&M is going to fire Jimbo and hire Sonny Dykes, and they didn't do it. And I think it's a bad move on their part.
Well, much like we were saying with Kansas and with Texas Tech, we got to see kind of how they build upon this.
Yeah.
Sonny Dykes did an amazing thing this year.
The difference here, though, is Sonny Dykes has a history of being a head coach. He was at Cal before. He's won games before. Nothing like this. But
no, Cal was never anything to write home about.
Well, Cal's always been like just a joke.
Subpar. Yeah, I mean.
Well, Cal is Cal's like UVA out west, right? Yeah. I mean, they don't care anything about football. But,
yeah,
I mean, Sonny Dykes went into Southern Methodist, built a program there. He did win 8 games at Cal. He won games at Louisiana Tech. Like, what you're seeing with him now, championship every year, I don't think that's happening. But this is very real. Like, TCU is going to be a good program going forward. He has a history of winning. I just don't think anybody thought year one he's going to be that great. I think I lost Ben.
No idea what happened there.
I don't know. Lost Ben. I don't know where I lost Ben on. But Sonny Dykes has a career record of 84-65.
It's better than a lot of head coaches.
Yeah. It really is. I wonder what Jimbo's record is. Here's the thing about Jimbo. We're really going off on Big 12 here. I just got to mention it. Okay, his career record's okay. His winning percentage at Texas A&M, do you know it's less than the winning percentage that Kevin Sumlin had there?
I'm not surprised. Kevin Sumlin never had a 4-win season.
Yep, that's true.
Ridiculous. He
did have a win this season. So let's see. Okay, 5-7. Hold on. Kevin Sumlin was 51-26 at A&M. Jimbo's 39-21. Yeah, terrible. Kevin Sumlin never missed a bowl game, though.
Yep. So, on the Jimbo Fisher side, the last time I remember a Cinderella story like TCU was when Auburn played Jimbo Fisher's FSU and should have won that national championship. And I apologize on behalf of the entire Auburn family, because if they had won that, then Jimbo Fisher would not be in the place he is now, probably. And yeah, it's one of those paradigm shifts in the universe. Just don't have a pass interference call and then let a player run for 50 yards.
It is highly advised that you not do that. All right. On that note, that is our because it's like 11 o'clock. So like my
Yeah,
energy
dude.
level is like exactly. All right. This is the Fourth String Podcast giving you another fourth string performance. Appreciate you guys tuning in. That was cool. Ben did like a fourth string salute.
It's our
Earlier,
new,
gave me
it's our new
the
move.
earlier gave me the one finger salute. That was before. So
That was before the camera was rolling.
yeah, that was. All right. This is the Fourth String Podcast. We'll be back at some point, someday, sometime. Don't know when. See ya. Bye.